Hey yo, football fans, it's another great year. Fantasy football fiends, grab your beer. Giving you the best draft tips for all your picks. Starts and sits to the waiver wire fix. From my drafts galore to stats that's hardcore. Triple F does it all, have y'all screaming more. So sit back, relax, let the experts prevail. JT Magnum, Siggy Guns never fail. What's up, fantasy football fans? My name is JT Magnum here along with Siggy Guns, and welcome to Fantasy Football Fiends Week 6 of your fantasy football season. Stardom Situm show. And real quick, if you want to get in on our DraftKings, nobody's been filling up the DraftKings lobbies for the money game, so I'm going to do some free contests. That way we just do some free contest bragging rights. So if you're in our DraftKings league, join the $0 free contest, and I think I labeled it bragging rights. So I'll keep labeling bragging rights, so that way you guys can, if you guys win, post in the comment section and say, hey, I won. We'll shout you out on the channel, most likely on the DraftKings show that I do, and that's it. And also, if you don't hear a name called, a name that you like this week for a starter sit, it's because we do a short show. We only name 3 guys per category, meaning per quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses. We only name 3 guys, and we only talk about one because it makes it a shorter show, and it makes it not, an hour and a half long, and nobody wants to watch a YouTube video for that long. I know I don't, so we try to make it nice and short and sweet for you and give you as much information as we can. All right, so moving on. Siggy, who's your starts at quarterback?
Dak Prescott, Ryan Tannehill, and Carson Palmer. I'm going to talk about Tannehill because he's been terrible. Now, Tannehill is up against Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's defense, especially in the air, has not been very good. And they are at home. The Dolphins, which didn't matter last week, they still got destroyed. But the coach had to give him the dreaded vote of confidence and say that Tannehill is our guy, which really means he might not be the guy. So if there's ever a week where he needed to really step up, especially at home in front of the fans, his fans, it's got to be now. And I think if he lays an egg, then this is it for Tannehill, which everybody's been wanting this done anyways, especially the Dolphins fans. But I do expect, with the soft defense that Pittsburgh has in the air especially, that Tannehill should have, I would say should be able to have a very good finish, very good line. I mean, he was only 12 of 19 for 180-something yards against Tennessee, and 2 interceptions, which obviously is bad. But if he can translate that into more of a 20 for 25 with 260 and 2-3 touchdowns, then that sounds a lot better. And I think Tannehill can do that against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
My starts this week are Tyrod Taylor, Alex Smith, and Matthew Stafford. I'll talk about Matt Stafford. He's been one of those tricky quarterbacks. I had him as a sit last week. It's like when you think he's going to be a sit, he's doing well against the good teams, but then he's sucking against the bad teams. Like, he didn't do well against Chicago, but he did great against Philadelphia, who's had a phenomenal defense so far this year. So it's just like one or the other, So this game, obviously, he's playing up against a pretty good defense in the LA Rams. So I'm going to pick him, especially at home, playing with Marvin Jones, and Theo Riddick's been catching out of the backfield. I really like Matthew Stafford this week against that Rams defense, who's also a little bit depleted. I mean, the only star they have in that defensive line at the moment playing is, I believe, Aaron Donald. The other 3 guys are hurt. I'm not sure if they're coming back, but I know they've been banged up a little bit on that front as well. So that'll give Matthew Stafford a little bit more time to get the ball off. Who's your running back starts?
Jonathan Stewart, Ryan Matthews, and LaShawn McCoy. And I'm going to talk about Jonathan Stewart. He's back. He's saying he's supposed to play this week. He's been practicing, I think, limited last week, and now they think he's back for sure. And New Orleans just gives up everything, whether it's on the ground, whether it's in the air. And we saw firsthand the offense without Cam Newton, which I do expect Newton back anyways this week. But even without Newton, we saw that it was a running gun kind of game, not running gun, ground and pound kind of game plan. Artist Payne and Forrest Whitaker, or whatever his name is, they were Fozzie Whitaker, right?
Yeah.
Fozzie Whitaker.
Forrest Whitaker's the actor.
Yeah, I know. No, I called him Forrest Whitaker on DraftKings. The ground game for Carolina is the only thing that's really been working, aside from throwing it to Greg Olsen. And obviously with Cam back, it's going to be Greg Olsen, but Stewart's going to be the engine, and I think Stewart is having a great game against New Orleans. It's going to be a complete game for all the offense, Carolina. I don't know about their defense, but the offense should be there for all the stars. So start everybody in Carolina, and Jonathan Stewart obviously should be a start.
I think we should name Fozzie Whitaker the butler.
There you go.
All right, my running back starts are Jordan Howard, Ryan Matthews, and Chris Ivory. And I'll talk about Jordan Howard. This is a guy we talked about I think maybe 2 weeks ago on the week 4 or week 3 show to pick him up early. We said it when Jeremy Langford went down. We said immediately pick up Jordan Howard. And now he's been tearing it up the last couple weeks, and this week is going to be no different going against that Jacksonville defense. The Bears aren't scared to run the ball. They will run the ball down your throats, and they will use play action with Brian Hoyer, and it's been working so far, and why not keep it going, especially against Jacksonville, who hasn't shown that they've been great on defense yet either this year. So I really like Jordan Howard this week, especially catching the ball as well. He's been doing well catching the ball out of the backfield. He's been doing it. He's been in like an everything running back. Everything they wanted Jeremy Langford to be, Jordan Howard's been so far for them this year.
Yep.
What's your wide receivers?
He was on my rookie list.
Yeah, he's
wide receivers
phenomenal.
Rashard Matthews, Will Fuller, and Jeremy Maclin. I'm going to talk about Will Fuller. Houston is up against Indianapolis. Indianapolis has been terrible on defense. I've been talking about it for a long time. A lot of these names that you hear from me are going to be against some of the same teams: Oakland, Indianapolis, San Diego, because it seems like they're always giving up the most points. Will Fuller should have a very good matchup here. He was very quiet last week. I expect them to key on DeAndre Hopkins, which he actually did okay. I wouldn't say it was great last week, but he was a focal point. But Fuller, I think, is going to have a lot more open looks. And I expect this game to not necessarily be a shootout, but it can be, especially since I'm not so sure that even though Houston's defense has been great against the pass, I don't know if that's going to stop T.Y. Hilton from going off on them. So Fuller is going to be needed a lot, and I think he's going to have a great game.
Bold predictions. I love it. All right, my wide receiver starts Willie Snead, Kelvin Benjamin, and Will Fuller as well. And the reason I'm going to talk about Willie Snead, the reason I'm talking about him, it's going to be a shootout in that dome. It's always shootouts in New Orleans. I never see low-scoring games when it's at the dome. Maybe sometimes when it's outside the dome, but inside the dome, it just always seems to be that kind of shootout. Willie Snead, Brandon Cooks, if you have them on your roster, start them immediately. Just start them, period. They're gonna get high points. They're gonna get lots of points in that Carolina defense. Carolina's gonna get lots of points on their defense. And that's why the Kelvin Benjamin start. But I'm telling you right now, Willie Snead's a great pickup. He's coming back from injury, from a bye and injury, so it could be a good week for him. Who's your tight end starts?
Jason Witten, Garrett Selleck, and Delaney Walker. And I'm going to talk about Selleck because I actually think the 49ers are going to get destroyed this game against Buffalo this week. But because they're going to be so far behind and Colin Kaepernick has been named the starter again, he's somebody that's always been lately anyways, his last 13 starts where he hasn't really been doing much, a dink and dunk kind of guy for some reason. Now, I know the Chip Kelly offense isn't necessarily like that. Jeremy Curley's been tearing it up. Torrey Smith, whenever he decides he wants to play, because sometimes he's good. But the real problem with the 49ers lately, obviously, you follow that team the most, is Gabbard is just horrible. And they made the decision to go to Kaepernick. I'm not so sure that he's grasped the whole Chip Kelly offense yet while he's been doing whatever he's been doing. And I just think Selleck is the guy that's going to benefit from being behind. So I think he's going to be the guy that's going to get a lot of targets.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Kaepernick or his situation. So I know he's starting. I don't know. I'm actually going to that game this week. Most likely I'll be at that game. I live in upstate New York, so I'll probably be at that game. Now that Kaepernick is starting, I'm actually going to go to the game. I wasn't going to go until I found out today that he was starting. Now I'm going to go. But my tight end starts are Eric Ebron, Jimmy Graham, and Delaney Walker. And I'll talk about Jimmy Graham. He's become relevant again, people. And he used to play the Falcons before. He knows how to get open. And the Falcons, they're not the greatest of defenses. Yes, they held Denver down last week, but that was only because Paxton Lynch, the rookie, was playing. And he just didn't look like he did, obviously, in the preseason. Preseason is different than the regular season. And he looked every part the rookie that he was. And Atlanta exposed him for it. But they're not playing Paxton Lynch this week. They're playing Russell Wilson, and Jimmy Graham is being finally used by Seattle. Couple games with 100 yards, and now he's rolling, and I think he's just going to tear up Atlanta.
I told you that it happened. Didn't I tell you that would happen eventually?
Yeah, you did. I think you said it at the beginning when you were like, Jimmy Graham's finally going to get used, and I was like, I don't know. He doesn't seem to be used at all. But he's being used now, happen. So if you have him if you're fortunate to have him in your lineup, put him in. Who's your defensive starts?
New England, Buffalo, and Tennessee. this week was pretty hard to pick defense because it seems like every matchup I look at on paper looks like it's going to be a potential high score for all of them. But New England at home, even though they got beat 16-0 last time against Buffalo, Cincinnati's been struggling. And also the mind of Coach Belichick is he knows the weaknesses of teams and how to stop them. And obviously, if you shut down A.J. Green, Cincinnati is not really a good team without Eifert being 100%. Now, he's supposed to play, at least he was supposed to play last week. I'm assuming he'll play this week. He might be a factor around the red zone, but I still think they're going to key on the engine, which is going to be A.J. Green. Shut him down, and then you shut down Cincinnati. So I think New England's defense at that point will be rolling. Obviously, their offense is going to be rolling with Brady. We saw firsthand that this weekend, and I think it's going to be a long day for Cincinnati.
Yeah, it is a little crazy on defense. You know what's going to be a crazy week on defense when the Tennessee Titans are one of the highly ranked defenses on DraftKings. So it's a little strange. But my defenses are Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. I'll talk about the Eagles. The Eagles came down to earth a little bit last week, especially in the first half against Detroit, but they showed in the second half. I think they only gave up 3 points in the second half to the Lions. Just happened to be the 3 points that lost them the game. And that happened at the end, obviously, from a Ryan Matthews fumble. But Philadelphia's defense is for real this year. Jim Schwartz has them flying around, no pun intended, but just literally playing good, solid football. And against the Redskins, I think they're going to expose Kirk Cousins a little bit, give him a rough time. I don't think it's going to be one of those type of shootout games in Washington. And I think the Eagles and Redskins are going to have a low-scoring affair, but Carson Wentz will pull it out in the end. I think that defense is going to shut Washington down. All right, moving on to the sit-em portion of the show. Siggy, who's your 3 sits for quarterbacks?
Colin Kaepernick, Blake Bortles, and Andy Dalton. I'm going to talk about Kaepernick. He's back, but we don't know what to expect. We do know that the reason why it's been, noted this past week that the reason why he wasn't playing is because he was quote unquote hurt, and his contract that was guaranteed this year has some stipulation that if he got hurt playing, then he was guaranteed money next year. So a lot of people are speculating that that's the reason why he wasn't playing. Then we find out a couple of days ago that he restructured his contract, and now all of a sudden he's a starter. But Chip Kelly said that's not the reason why he's starting, which I think we all know that that's the reason why he's starting. So we know that Kaepernick's better than Gabbert, but we don't know what to expect him not playing. We saw all we can base upon is what he's been doing in preseason. He did good against fourth string on the last game that he played, but versus starters, we don't know what to expect. We do know that the 49ers offense has not looked good. They are 1-4, and they're playing against a Buffalo team that has pretty good defense at their stadium. I don't expect Kaepernick to go in there guns blazing right away, so I think it should be a sit for now.
And I think Siggy's assuming that because of the hype of Colin Kaepernick, being the starter, a lot of people who are low on quarterbacks or have just sorry quarterbacks on their team might jump on him for the rushing aspect, and they might jump on him on the waiver wires and try to pick him up if they can. He's probably not worth your start either. I actually agree with you.
You know what? He has been actually the hottest. If you go to all your leagues, he's probably the number one pickup right now for some reason.
Yeah, because it's the Michael Vick effect. People think you're going to get a lot of rushing yards along with passing yards, and along with things like that. And
I think the whole Chip Kelly aspect too. I think everybody thought that with Chip Kelly as the coach that he's going to be what Vic was, like you said, Vic. They expect somebody that's going to throw at least 200 and rush for 100 and can have 3-4 touchdowns a game. Which I don't know if that's going to happen. Potentially he could. Don't get me wrong. He's done it before, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah. For my sits though, I have Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, and Dak Prescott. And I'll talk about Phillip Rivers. This is one of those things like the Matt Ryan effect where I keep saying sit Matt Ryan and he's been doing well. I'm done sitting Matt Ryan, by the way. I'm not sitting him anymore, period. But Phillip Rivers this week against the Denver Broncos. Denver had a hard time against Matt Ryan, but I don't think they know Phillip Rivers. They know the Chargers. They know the Chargers offense. They know they play him every year period, two times a year. So it's just going to be one of those probably low-scoring affairs in this one. Low-scoring for San Diego, I should say. Denver just doesn't – they shut down quarterbacks and they shut down wide receivers. And San Diego really – they only have Travis Benjamin and Tyrell Williams. And I just think Denver's – the way they play defense, the way they play their zone, the way they play defense in general, they're going to be all over Phillip Rivers. So he's not a good start in my opinion this week. Who's your running back sits?
He might shock you, though.
He might. I mean, you never know. The way this year has gone, it's been a little crazy. I mean, like I said, I've sat a couple people this year that have scored like 50 points in a game.
My running backs is Spencer Ware, Rashad Jennings, and Jeremy Hill. And I'm going to talk about Spencer Ware. What's his face? Declared himself. I already forgot his name already. That's how
Jamal
Charles. He declared himself 100%. Now Spencer Ware has been a guy that's been carrying the torch. He's been doing very solid against Oakland. On paper, that should be a great matchup. I'm pretty sure your fantasy, lineups like ESPN they're saying that he's probably still going to have good numbers. Don't believe it. Everybody thought when it was Spencer Ware and West, Chandrick West, whatever, however you say it, they thought he was going to be splitting time. It wound up not being like that. So if Jamal Charles is 100% and he's carrying the ball, Spencer Ware might be only in for 5-6 carries at the most. I can see him being used if Oakland is ahead and they need to try to catch up and probably run a faster pace offense. Then maybe Charles on his knee might not be the person that they want that. But if he's at 100%, do you really want Ware over Charles? I mean, that's the question in the end. So I think Charles is going to be, if he's 100%, Ware's not going to be used at all.
Yeah, for my running back sits, I have Matt Jones, Jay Ajayi, who had a good game last week, and Devonta Freeman. And I'll talk about Devonta Freeman. I don't like him against the Seahawks. Now, here's where Atlanta, I think, comes to a little screeching halt when it comes to their run game. I don't think they can pound the Seahawks defensive front, especially in Seattle. If this game was in Atlanta, then I probably wouldn't sit Devonta Freeman just because it's in the dome there. But outdoors in Seattle, the way that crowd rolls, the way everything happens there, it could be raining. It's just, you never know in Seattle. I don't like Devonta Freeman, and I don't like Tevin Coleman this week against the Seahawks. But he's the main starter, so I'll talk about Freeman, even though I believed Tevin Coleman actually has more fantasy points than him this year.
Nope, he does. It's because he catches real good in the backfield. And, I mean, like I've been saying it too, that Coleman, he won the starting job from Freeman last year. It was an injury that lost him. So yeah. He is better than Freeman, in my opinion. I actually think Atlanta's offense is better with Coleman.
They're both good. I think they're both ranked the same.
I guess when they're both doing really well, then you could have like a thunder and lightning kind of aspect to it, I guess. And obviously it's working. But I do think that if Coleman was by himself, he would be up as one of the best running backs in the league, in my opinion, as far as fantasy goes. He would be up there.
Yeah. I think at NFL.com, they're number 7 and 8 ranked running backs together. I mean, not combined. I mean, literally 7 and 8. It's crazy.
Yep. Yeah.
Who's your wide receiver sits?
My receiver sits is Allen Hurns, Jeremy Curley, and Tyrell Williams. I'm going to talk about Tyrell Williams. You already alluded to Phillip Rivers playing Denver, and one of them is going to get impacted by that. And they've both been playing well, Williams and Benjamin, but I think Rivers trusts Benjamin more. In the end, we saw this last game where they lost. We saw them, like it was Oakland, right? They played. Mm-hmm. I was watching that game, and I saw the 2-minute drill and everything. He was just throwing to Benjamin. Williams was the guy that was hot in the beginning, but he kind of faded at the end, and he was really trusting Benjamin. So in a game against Denver's defense, I think he's going to go with who he trusts the most, and I think that's Benjamin.
Yeah, for my wide receiver sits, I have some actually big names on here. Brandon Marshall, T.Y. Hilton, and Jordan Matthews. And I'll talk about Brandon Marshall. He had a solid game against Richard Sherman when Richard Sherman was covering him in Seattle. But the catches he had to make to get his yards and to get his catches were, they were amazing. And that's what Brandon Marshall is. But he's playing this week against Patrick Peterson, and Patrick Peterson shadows the number 1 wide receiver all game long. And with the way Fitzpatrick's been throwing, I don't know if I know Brandon Marshall's going to get targets because they're going to throw to him. I just don't know how many catches or yards he might get and if he might get a touchdown this week. They'd have to move that. They'd have to be able to move the ball against Arizona all the way down a lot. And I don't know if the Jets, with their run game and the way things are going this year, I don't know if they can move that ball because they need a wide receiver opposite of Marshall. Because right now they're literally.
That's never been the Jets' problem this season, moving the ball. It's just punching it in or trying to get the score at the end. I think that Jenkins was a really good pickup for them because he was actually doing pretty well for a little bit there. But Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that he obviously needs help, but I think that Unwanagasa guy is going to be the one that does that.
Yeah, Quincy
Enunwa.
Anunwa. Yeah, he's okay, but they need Decker. They need that Decker
Oh
factor
yeah,
back.
yeah, definitely.
That was their
Definitely.
guy in the red zone. That was the guy that people keyed on. It was able to free up Marshall for fade routes, and they just haven't been able to do that. And they're
Yep.
forcing the ball so much to Marshall, and he's making plays. I mean, last week he made a touchdown catch off a juggling tip ball. I mean, he made a great catch, but how many of those can he get every week? And I don't know about facing Patrick Peterson this week. Who's your tight end sits?
My tight end sits are Julius Thomas, Antonio Gates, and Dennis Pitta. I'm going to talk about Gates because, this is somebody that I was talking about trust just now. Obviously, Philip Rivers trusts Gates a lot, but there's been another tight end that's been tearing it up in San Diego, and I think they're going to be trusting him a lot more, and that's Hunter. I had him as my starter last week. I hope you started him because he actually did very well. I think Gates is starting to close the window for him. And against Denver, obviously, not many people are going to, they're going to probably get a key on somebody like him anyways. But I think against Denver, the whole offense might struggle, like you said, rivalry, etc. But Gates' window is closing faster because now his opportunities aren't there. This is somebody that used to always get targeted 11, 12 times a game. Now all of a sudden, he's doing a 5 and 6. And now, sure, he might still get some red zone looks, but it's too much of a risk to gamble to have him as your starter if you're daily fantasy leagues or etc.
I mean, how blessed is San Diego? I mean, they're on Gates is on the way out, and Hunter Henry steps up and is tearing it up. I mean, it's so hard to find quality players in areas, and they just found another quality tight end easily, like it was nothing. And they had Ladarius Green. They let him go for Hunter Henry, who happens to be good. So it's crazy. But
and he went to Pittsburgh, right? That's funny because he went to Pittsburgh, Ladarius, and that wound up being like a trash trade. And then it was like, oh well, let's just pick up this Jesse James guy. Now all of a sudden he's doing good.
Yeah, and Ladarius is set to come back week 7 or week 8, I believe. So
I bet they'll cut him.
No, he'll be ready to play. He's going to be ready apparently. So we'll see. But my tight ends, the sits are Dennis Pitta, Kobe Fleener, and Jacob Tamme. And I'll talk about Fleener going against Carolina's defense. I know it said it was going to be a shootout, but that doesn't mean necessarily that Kobe Fleener is going to be involved in that shootout. I don't like him against Carolina's defense only because Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly are great coverage linebackers, and they have great coverage safeties, and they just make it really difficult for tight ends to get the ball. So don't look for Fleener to get a lot of catches. Look for Mike Thomas, Brandon Cooks, and Willie Snead to get the bulk of those catches and the bulk of those yards, along with Mark Ingram catching out of the backfield. But I don't see Kobe Fleener being that guy this week. Who's your sits for defense?
Carolina Panthers, Seattle Seahawks, and Kansas City Chiefs. Now I'm going to talk about the Seahawks. That's a big one against Atlanta. Like I said, Atlanta, for some reason, their offense is just really, really good this year. Atlanta just tore it up against Denver, and that was without Julio Jones doing anything. And like we talked about, Seattle, obviously they're going to be keying on Julio Jones, but they have so many weapons. And I know Coleman and Freeman might not be able to run, but we saw what they would do with them instead. They're going to be doing screen passes. They're going to make sure that they utilize them any way they can. And that's what they did to Denver, and I think that's the same formula they need against Seattle. So I do see Coleman especially being somebody that's going to get a lot of catches in the backfield. That's how they move it up against Seattle. And then whenever it's right in that red zone area, you're going to see Jacob Tamme, you're going to see Julio Jones, you're going to see a whole bunch of, what's his name, Sanu. You're going to see everybody be just throwing it up there to see if the Seattle Seahawks can go ahead and do something with it. And it looks like Atlanta's always pulling them down at the end. So I don't trust Seattle's defense against Atlanta, even in Seattle.
Yeah, for my defensive sits, I also have Seattle and Carolina and Los Angeles. And Seattle's actually on a couple of my fantasy teams this year. And believe it or not, I'm not going to sit them. I have them on my sit list, but I'm not going to sit them because I just don't feel like picking anybody up to do that. So a lot of times, I'll get to that in a second, but I'll talk about Carolina.
It
happens. Yeah. It happens. Trust me. Carolina. I'm going to talk about Carolina, though. Like I said, it's going to be a shootout in the Dome. You don't want to start Carolina's defense this week. I don't think they're going to shut New Orleans down or Drew Brees down. They haven't been able. They didn't shut Matt Ryan down in that Dome. They're not going to shut Drew Brees down in the Dome. So just sit them. If you have Carolina this week, and I mean, you don't have to sit them, but they're probably one of the most teams I think you should probably sit out of the top tier defenses this week, going forward, at least in this game this week. So that does it for the Start 'em Sit 'em show. Guys, leave comments in the comment section. Don't forget, you don't have to sit the people that we talk about. I mean, if you have a stud on there that we talked about, you don't have to sit them. Go with your gut if you feel like they might do better than what we think. Do your homework, do your research, go to other channels, check them out. Put all your research in, ask questions, and make your own assumption or make your own decision of what you want to start for your team. Do what's best for your team. We do the same for ours, and we just come up with the best analysis we can for the players that we have and the players that we discuss. But if you want to talk about other players that we did not mention, there's somebody you feel that's a good start, mention them in the comment section. We'll tell you about what we think about them, because like I said, we don't have time to mention all the players that we can.
I know we always repeat this. I know we always repeat the same thing, but we don't normally talk about the big players and the starts. And also, some of my starts, might not be high tier, top tier, anything like that. But I'm somebody that's been kind of ditched the traditional fantasy leagues and more so in the daily fantasy, whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, and a lot of these are the players that you're going to be picking from, because you can't start Antonio Brown and DeAndre Hopkins and all three of them and expect to have money left over for these other guys. So guys like Will Fuller, Rashard Matthews, they become important because they don't cost as much, and they're the ones that you're going to be looking at. Do I start him over, say, Landry, etc.? And while, like last week, I know Mike Evans was a big topic because he was somebody that I had on my sit list, I didn't trust him for the price. Now, he wound up doing good. Don't get me wrong. He had, I think, 18 fantasy points, whatever it was. But the guy that I wound up starting instead of him was Thielen, whatever his name is, from Minnesota, and he wound up tearing it up. And that's because he cost half of what Mike Evans cost. And on top of that, Stephon Diggs was hurt, and I knew that it was going to be him getting some. I didn't think he was getting that much, but I knew he was going to get a lot more attention than he's gotten in the past. And sure enough, he wound up destroying Mike Evans, and it wound up being a good thing. So I probably should say that most of my sits in some of these guys is more because of what I do fantasy-wise, whether on daily fantasy sites like DraftKings. So a lot of the big names I won't play because of that. So.
Yeah, I started Adam Thielen too. As soon as I found out Stephon Diggs was out, I went immediately to DraftKings and started Adam Thielen, like immediately, and it paid off. It paid off dividends actually.
Big time, and then you had enough money left over to go ahead and upgrade the quarterback. At least that's what happened to me. I wound up getting him, and then I wound up upgrading to Brady as quarterback instead, and they wound up paying off. Now, don't get me wrong. I think I would have had maybe the same points with Rivers if I would have stuck with him, but. It wound up being worth it in the end.
Yeah. So guys, like I said, leave your comments in the comment section. Stay tuned. Tomorrow will be the Sleepers episode. Then on Thursday, I actually have a DraftKings show as well. So lots of fantasy football for you guys for the week now. I'm doing videos. I'm recording them early so I can get them out to you by Wednesday and Thursday and today, like I said. So stay tuned for a lot more fantasy for you guys. I'm trying to give you guys the most content I can and the best content we can. All right. So best of luck, you guys, for your Week 6 fantasy teams and your DraftKings or FanDuel, whatever you play, and win that money. Win those games. All right, guys. Best of luck. Peace out, guys. Peace.